So I'm Rosie Anderson from That Security Company. I'm here with Stephen Ridgway and Rich Benfield, our cyber greybeards, as we lovingly refer to them. Um, Tell us who you are for anybody who doesn't know Stephen.
Yes, so I'm Stephen Ridgway. I'm the COO and co-founder of That Security Company in PocketSeam.
And Rich?
I'm Rich Benfield. I am the Director of Technology here at That Security Company and Pocket Scene.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. So today we're going to talk about cybersecurity strategy management. So what is a strategy?
So the first thing to point out that's probably quite critical is that a cybersecurity strategy is definitely not the same as an IT strategy. With an IT strategy, you're generally looking at things like productivity improvements, so new tools, new applications, new servers, new cloud offerings, things like that. Whereas the focus on a cybersecurity strategy is around business risks and a business's appetite for risk and doing things as safely as you possibly can.
Yeah, I very much agree with that. And it's something else to bear in mind is that there's often some confusion around what the strategy is as to what the vision is. So the vision is where you want to end up. And hopefully you understand the state of things as they are at the moment. You've worked out that there are things that you want to improve, and you've got an end state in mind. The strategy is how you get from where you are to where you want to be. So you see a lot of people talking about a strategy as if it's the vision. So the vision will deliver the strategy. Well, it's the other way around. The strategy delivers to the vision. And that's an important thing to bear in mind. This is really to do with the roadmaps about how you get to that agreed end state.
Okay. So why do we need a cybersecurity strategy?
Um, One of the key things around needing a strategy is to be able to explain to an organization what work is going to be being done, being generated out of your particular area. So in this case, InfoSec or cyber or whatever. Um, Almost all InfoSec and cyber projects are interdepartmental. So it's very difficult for you to deliver a cybersecurity improvement program without touching other parts of the organization. There are going to be people, process, and technology changes that go outside of one particular area. So if you look at a technology vision, technology strategy, on the other hand, you can quite often do things in the background that the rest of the organization doesn't really know about. They just see some benefits later on. Um, but with security changes, they tend to impact people. They will be changing the way that people authenticate, what they can do with emails, how they browse the internet, all sorts of things may get swept up into that. So having the strategy gives you the opportunity then to explain to other parts of the business what is about to happen, and then you can get buy-in from them, because there's nothing worse than kicking off a project and finding that the other people that you need in order to deliver their parts are just sitting there saying, well, that's not in my KPIs. So, I'll fit that in when I get round to it, kind of thing. You actually need buy-in for these sorts of things. So it then gives you that framework that you can use to build the program of work, including all the cross-departmental activities that will take you to where you've agreed you need to be from a cyber maturity perspective.
Okay.
So how do you know that you're on track to deliver strategically aligned business benefits without a strategy to align to?
Yeah, that's a
Well,
good point.
in short, you don't. Without a strategy, you basically only have a shopping list. And if you only have a shopping list, then you'll find yourself creating a strategy on the fly. Because cybersecurity is a company-wide concern, you need to be able to communicate your plans clearly. And the strategy is how you do this. If you don't build a strategy, you're just going to find that you are drip feeding information back to the business, which is not only annoying, but potentially disruptive. If you do not communicate the whole strategy, you'll be seen as the department that likes to block people from doing their work. You'll also be on the back foot politically speaking. If you communicate a well thought out strategy, the business will see a coherent, well considered plan that helps support the business in achieving its goals safely and to a known timeline too.
That all makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it does. I agree with all of that.
So, what common mistakes do cyber leaders make then?
So, confusing strategy with tool buying. If your strategy is to say, we will buy X tool and it will do this for us, then that's not a strategy. That's just a benefit analysis for a tool. That doesn't explain how you're solving a business risk problem. In fact, tools don't even need to be considered at this stage. At the strategy level, you'd say something like, this year, we will tackle insecure remote access in order to help mitigate the risk of threat actors breaking into our network. The answer may well be to enable MFA or purchase an identity management tool, but that's further down the line. Only consider technology and neglecting people and processes. So this is a big one. Cybersecurity affects every department in the business and at every level in the hierarchy. Some departments will be heavily tech focused, others less so. You will have far more success and a much deeper impact if you cover all three aspects of people, process, and technology. Not being relevant to the business or situation. So, slightly controversial view here, but you don't have to implement everything you've seen in a CISSP training course. Your security solution should match the level of risk that the business can accept and that they can budget for and is relevant to your sector. The threat profile from a hospital, after all, is very different to that of a factory. Neglecting the basics, doing what's in fashion. Getting the basics right, even in this day and age, goes a long way to securing your systems. Change your default passwords, implement MFA, update that firmware. A good baseline level of security will always stand you in good stead. Moving on, small industry, but a large percentage of snake oil. At the risk of sounding too controversial, there's a lot of products out there which don't do what they say they will. And unlike the IT industry, where there are very well established vendors and very well established and well developed products, in the cybersecurity industry, it's moving at quite a pace, and a lot of this stuff isn't quite established yet. So, what you see in the marketplace are tools that promise the earth and deliver nothing. And that is a major problem. You'll find these vendors at all the shows, all the conferences, and it's very easy to be swept up with strong marketing. So in your strategy, you want to make sure that you're dealing with good, solid vendors that you know a lot about. You don't want to drop in anything that may not work further down the line, may not fit the business correctly, and may not actually address the risks on your risk register. So that leads on to the last point I have around many people responsible get their vision ideas from salespeople and conferences, but that is funded by sales and marketing. So you have to be aware that you are being sold to. And the problem with being sold to is that there is a temptation for you to just hand off the research element to these security vendors and their sales teams, who will feed you, obviously, the information they want to that presents them in the best possible light. But you have to make sure that you dig a bit deeper. You have to do your own research. And that way you can make sure you're making a balanced and well-informed decision.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Especially, I mean, I think the last time I looked, there are 2,000 to 3,000 potential products in the cybersecurity space. Actually, focusing in on the ones that are going to be good for your business is quite hard, but it is worth the effort, because otherwise they all claim to be the magic silver bullet or whatever for all problems, and they're often not. The sorts of problems that I've seen cyber leaders get into over strategy. I mean, the first one is overconfidence. It's is very tempting to look at all the things that need to be done and think in your own mind, well, okay, all we need to do is this bunch of stuff, and then we've solved all sorts of problems. So I would be cautious about overdoing it. It isn't that from a cyber perspective you can't do it, or maybe your infosec team plus your vendors, MSSP, whoever can do it, but you've got to bring the rest of the business along with you, and that may actually restrict the amount of change that you're going to be able to actually deliver at any one particular time. So don't be overconfident either about the amount of stuff that can get done, or about the how little effort will be required. It will invariably take longer and require more effort than you expect. Next problem that I've seen is around kind of financial anchoring. So this is basically using the strategy as a means to obtain funding rather than using the strategy as a means to deliver improvement. So the funding should follow an understanding at board or C level that the investment is required. It doesn't. You don't start out by saying, okay, I'm going to put together a strategy so that I can get a big budget. Now that happens. I've seen that happen. Actually, quite frankly, I think I've done that myself in the past when I was younger. Be careful to make sure that then that the focusing on the finance stuff is very important. And I think that there are a lot of cyber leaders that don't necessarily understand how the whole process works, but we can talk about that in a bit. But yeah, understand it, but don't get it the wrong way around. Don't put the cart before the horse in that respect. I do also see quite a lot of status quo bias. One of the things that holds back cyber maturity in organizations is this approach across the technical side of the organization that we've just always done it like this. And that's coupled with we've always done it like this, and we've never had any problems. Now that is, I think, it's a compelling argument to people who don't work in the industry. But if you have got some knowledge about what's going on, there's like the two things to bear in mind with that is, well, unless you've invested a certain amount anyway, you probably don't know whether you've been compromised or not. And the second point is the fact that you weren't compromised in the past doesn't mean that you won't be compromised in the future, because at a purely technical level, vulnerabilities change, technology changes. It's your technical environment is not in a vacuum. It's actually it's regularly being changed, enhanced, and whatever that may be. But also the threat actor groups change their focus depending on what's going on. So right now we've got wars going on in two parts of the world. That has changed the focus of certain APTs and certain nation state backed threat actors. So there are organisations that just weren't in the they weren't a target, they weren't in the firing line 2 or 3 years ago, that most firmly are now. So status quo bias can be an easy trap to fall into. An even worse trap to fall into is trying to outsource accountability for security. You can outsource the delivery of the service, you can outsource the responsibility for day-to-day actions, but in the end, you own the accountability within your organization. Now, hopefully, if you're in an organization that's mature enough that you've got perhaps a CISO, head of security, and a team or whatever, that may sound obvious, but actually there are a lot of organizations that are looking at cyber still as being a sort of subset of tech, and it is tempting to be sold the, well, just give us all your problems, we'll sort it out, which comes back to the snake oil approach, which is sadly too common, I think, in our industry at the moment. Yeah, you can get MSSPs that can do all sorts of things. Almost anything you're prepared to pay them for, they'll do it. But in the end, it's down to you to have the accountability for that stuff. So you need to make sure that what you're paying for is being delivered, and that what you're actually asking for is the stuff that really addresses the business risks, in not just the the latest fad in cyber. There is also quite a lot of herd instinct and false consensus. So you hear a lot of noise, and a lot of this again is driven out of the vendor community. But you hear a lot of noise around, let's say, things like SOAR or machine learning or artificial intelligence. If you just look at the infosec news, you would think that everybody believes that these things are the answer. It was SOAR a couple of years ago. More recently, it was machine learning. Now it's all about AI. The truth of the matter is that in the background, there isn't a consensus on this stuff. I mean, all of those things are good tools. But the fact that you regularly come across organizations that are looking for SOAR or looking for machine learning is looking at it the wrong way around. I mean, what you've actually got, somewhere in amongst that, you've got a business risk that you've identified as, there's a cyber risk in there or an infosec risk as part of that business risk, and you need a solution to that. So you don't need a tool that does something or works in a particular way, but you would find it quite hard to pick that out from the noise in the cyber news, infosec news. So watch out for herd instinct, confirmation bias, and selective recall. I mean, that's that from a senior leadership perspective, that's something that we've all got to fight against. If you have a particular view, there is a strong tendency to look for evidence that supports your view, rather than looking for evidence that could potentially support other views. And selective recall is the other side of that. So if you have just been browsing around and you've got in the back of your mind a particular view of how things ought to be, you're more likely to remember articles, talks, presentations, or whatever that confirm that. Rather than the ones that might say there are other equally viable or better alternatives. So confirmation bias is something, and that's not just a strategy problem. That's just something that you've got to keep on top of as you're working as a senior leader. The last two, I think, are also quite important. Lack of alignment with business budget timelines. Aligning your strategy, your vision, your strategy, your budget requests, and so on. Those have to be aligned with the business timelines. The number of times that I've seen infosec leaders go back to their own business halfway through a financial year with a plan that says, do you know what, I've just identified we've got this huge risk. We're going to have to spend X million fixing this. It's going to take us the next 6 months at least, and we need a bunch of consultants. And the CFO looks at it and goes, well, I get it. I can understand this, but I'm looking at the figures and there's nowhere for that to go. So you're either talking about taking that out of our company profits, or or we'll have to just stop doing something else in order to fund that. Whereas if you work within the system and if you align what you need, it is much, much easier then to get it delivered and funded. If it's been through that budget cycle, and there is an understanding that in the next 12 months we're going to have a major stab at securing our websites. Going to need 500,000, and it's going to take 3 months worth of consultant. Okay, if the business understands that that is actually important and then agrees to put it in the budget, when you come along saying I need to spend the money now, they're not going to look at you as if you're an alien. So that aligning with the budget timeline is really important. And the other one then is aligning with business strategy. I mean, there's nothing worse than trying to sell a vision for infosec or cyber that doesn't actually align with business strategy. If the business is, busily moving from on-prem to cloud, and you come back with a whole load of stuff you want to do in the data centers, they are unlikely to see that favorably. It just makes it look like you're not in touch with what's going on. And the fact that you begin to appear to be out of touch with what the business is doing means that you're losing influence over the things that really do need to be done. So alignment with business strategy is really important.
Some excellent points there. Thank you. So, how do we actually design a strategy then?
Um, so I think the starting point has got to be to understand where you are at the moment from an infosec perspective, and where the business is from a business maturity perspective as well. Okay, so a gap analysis then against the current security maturity and potential future states. Okay, is the place where you need to begin. So you need to identify. Okay, for a business like ours, we would expect to be at this level of maturity from an infosec perspective. I can see already that we're not in these particular areas. So those areas then are the ones that we want to focus on, and that gives you that initial structure that you can build the rest of the strategy around. There's a caveat to that there is no point in trying to be more cyber mature than the business is business mature. It's If you've ever tried to do it, you'll know, I'm sure, it's very uncomfortable trying to mature the business by improving their security. The misalignment there it'll do you no favors within the organization, but you probably won't get to where you need to be anyway. So it may well be that you have to align carefully what you're trying to do, even if you can see that there's a longer term state that you need to get to. You can only get there as fast as the business can mature. Excuse me. So matching cyber risk against business risk is the way that you work out of those things that need to be done. What's the order that you need to be doing them in? So one of the things that comes out of having a strategy is that you should end up with effectively a high-level roadmap that delivers the right stuff, ending up with you've delivered the vision for the next 12 months or 18 months, whatever it might be. That there is a certain amount of technical dependency or resource dependency that may be in there, but the way to start looking at that is, well, what does the business need most? What are the things that I can do that mitigate the largest business risks, and will front load those, and the only stuff that comes before that are things which are technical dependencies that need to be done before you can do those things. So ensuring that the cyber risks and the business risks are properly aligned, and using those to inform the roadmap is really important. So yeah, you should end up at that point with then a roadmap which has got resources in it. So if you're going to be doing X, Y, and Z, you're going to need these many of your internal people. You might need some consultants from outside. Oh, and by the way, as you're going through this, you need to build in user acceptance testing, because I don't know, you're changing the way that everybody authenticates. Well, you can't just go, oh, come in on Monday, you're going to authenticate differently. A recipe for total chaos and definite loss of influence in your own organization. So you end up with this kind of hierarchical overlapping roadmap that will take you from where you are to where you've got the agreement you're going to be. And then you should also at that point be able to say, well, okay, the costs therefore are going to be X, Y, and Z. So you get a blueprint budget that comes out of that. That needs to include all things from a budget perspective, by the way, not just hard costs out of the door kind of thing, not just consultants or licensing or hardware or cloud costs or whatever. You need to look at ongoing changes to run rate. So if you implement this strategy, if you're suddenly going to need yourself, you're saying I want 24/7 SOC and I'm going to run it internally. Well, you're actually going to have to think about who is going to be sat there at midnight looking at your seam. So you may well find yourself needing recruitment. Well, if you're going to need recruitment, you've got to go through the whole headcount piece and get sign off and so on and so forth. But it works across the whole piece. If you're making changes to things, what will the operational uplift in cost be going forward as a consequence of what you've done? That needs to be understood up front. And again, if it is understood up front and it is signed off, you won't have any problems later on. If you squirrel this stuff away and come back later going, oh, actually, I didn't quite tell you that we need to renew those licenses every year, it wasn't a one-off purchase, this results in growling from the CFO. So yeah, the impacts on BAU need to be in the blueprint budget, as well as all of the kind of hard costs that you can see in there as well. So based on that, you've ended up then with your vision, you've got a strategy, you've got a roadmap, and you've got a breakdown of what the costs are, both in capital expenditure and in operational expenditure and operational uplift. That's kind of your pack that you then take to the board eventually, to say, look, this is what we want to do, this is why we want to do it, this is how we're going to do it, and this is what it's going to cost, and these are the benefits that you get at the end of that.
That's all great advice. So we've got our strategy. What are we doing next then?
So getting it signed off and funded
Mm,
is that's the next thing. So the process of getting things like this signed off and funded and agreed is something that isn't natural, I think, to a lot of people that work either in tech or in infosec or cyber. I would recommend that you talk in terms of business risk and business benefit, because the um, the board will see security standards and things as arbitrary stuff that they don't really so you may understand that if you're aligning with the NIST framework, it's
mm,
actually going to eliminate a whole load of business risk. But if you go in saying, I want us to align with the NIST cyber framework, they'll look at you as if you're an alien again. It's like, well, I don't know what that is. I don't know why are you even talking to me about this? I've got far more important things to do. Whereas if you go in saying, well, okay, I've identified that we've got these risks. These cyber risks align with these business risks. So use your business risk process as part of preparing the argument for why this stuff needs to be addressed. Loss of reputation through breach, regulatory issues, downtime through ransomware. If you're a manufacturer and your operational technology stuff gets encrypted and switched off, well, you're not making the thing that you're supposed to be making with those tools, and that will have a cost, and the cost will be understood by people outside of your area. So making sure that you're talking about these things in language that they understand, which is basically just align what your understanding of the cyber and infosec risks with their understanding of the business risks, and speak about it in the language of finance. It's going to cost you this much. If this factory was offline for, you're losing this much money per hour. And the reason why I think it might go offline is because I've identified the following vulnerabilities. We're not securing this, we're not patching that, whatever it would be. Therefore, I want to do this. So the next thing I think is to then make sure that you actually get authority to engage with the project delivery part of the organization. So as I said before, almost every infosec or cyber project is cross-departmental, it's interdepartmental. You can't do this stuff without getting support from other people, even if you don't think you need their support. But literally saying something like, well, we're going to implement MFA. Yeah, okay, great. You can tick a box somewhere and all of a sudden it'll start asking users for MFA. Well, if you've done that to your users and they then can't work out how to log in, you're going to have a lot of very disgruntled people making a lot of noise very high up in the organization about how badly you manage change. So making sure that you've got that visibility in amongst the program of work that the business is going to be committing to, and that you have got an understanding via the roadmap that you've pulled together of where you need to have people from other departments working with you, user acceptance testing, what's your approach to all these sorts of things. Get that buy-in before you get started. And then track progress and report progress back to the senior sponsors for, if you're a head of, InfoSec reporting up to a CISO, well, you want to make sure the CISO has got information about all of the stuff, all the good stuff that's happening. Basically tracking the business benefit deliverables throughout the whole project. In that way, as you go through your gated process of the project delivery, getting the next tranche of money signed off, it becomes very easy because you say, okay, we said we'd do this. It's going to deliver this benefit at this point. We've done that bit. Now, off the back of that, we're going to do this bit. And there'll be, hopefully, a general agreement nodding, and you'll be able to progress through. So it's about articulating, incremental progressive wins will keep everybody else on board, and it will also remind them, especially if you've got stuff that goes on in the background that doesn't touch a broader part of the organization to begin with. You don't want them to forget that this stuff is going to happen. Because otherwise you've got to go back through winning them back over again later in the year. So, articulating progressive wins is really important.
Perfect. So then when you go to do your implementation, what are the pitfalls to watch out for?
This is a tricky area. So, as you can see there, we've got saboteurs and silos, bureaucracy, cashless budget, and organizational change. So, saboteurs and silos. I've worked in various companies that are of varying sizes, some small, some quite large, and silos are difficult to break down. I worked in one business where silos were so deeply entrenched that you couldn't even get a slot to talk to the manager of another department. And in those instances, it's very, very hard to implement new cybersecurity initiatives. And you'll find that in companies that suffer from silos, that you actively get saboteurs, people that don't want to support your changes. They want to work in the simplest, easiest way possible, which is frequently the least secure way. And so they will actively try and stop you. They might use bureaucracy to do that. In fact, moving on to the next point, they might have red tape and reasons and excuses and tie you up in meeting after meeting in order just to stop you from progressing with the implementation of your cybersecurity strategy. Another major issue is the cashless budget. You've got your strategy in place. It's been agreed in principle. You've been told the budget is there, but then for whatever reason, when you come to spend the cash, it is denied. That can be a change in operating conditions for the business, downturn in the economy, or it could have been waiting on contracts that come in to supply the funding that may have slowed down or not be forthcoming, or you might simply be trying to make a large spend at the wrong time of year. All of these things can disrupt your implementation plan. And having the ability to pivot to still make security gains is going to be key in that sort of scenario, because not everything costs the earth. Some of it can be policies and procedures, for instance. If you have the ability to write those in-house, then it doesn't necessarily have to cost you anything. But you might find that the order in which you implement your cybersecurity strategy actually has to change. But you must, of course, update your risk register and involve and notify your C-level sponsors in order to let them know what's going on within the business that's preventing you from meeting your goals in the timeline previously agreed. Organizational change is another big one. So it's not uncommon for changes in leadership to happen midway through implementation of cybersecurity strategy. And that means an organization might suddenly pivot and change direction. And you will have to rework your plans and strategy to suit this. It's also really quite common for things to happen at a mid-level. So middle management changes, restructures of departments and things of that nature. And again, this might well affect what's going on in your strategy. Another thing that can happen is an organization maybe releases a new product or opens a new site or closes an office. Anything like that can have an impact. And that will not only affect your rollout plans, but also it could well affect your budget. So again, you might find you have more or less cash available. In fact, it's very rare that you find that you have more cash available, let's be honest. Chances are it will be affecting your budget in a negative way. But obviously your mileage will vary on that one. But yeah, don't forget these 4 key points just highlight the volatile nature of some businesses. So being able to roll with the punches, being able to adapt your plans is absolutely key to success.
Well, that's been great. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. Yeah, if anyone's got any questions, they can reach out to us. They can reach out to Stephen or Rich directly on LinkedIn or drop us an email, and we'll see if we can help. But thank you so much for your time, guys. That's been really, really useful.
That's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed.